Is there anything wrong with my shirt?
It's off now. But when you're doing this kind of thing, you just press something. Just like this, very nice.
I don't care. I don't care. Why?
Because there's your audience.
Who is my audience?
You don't want corporate people to be your audience.
Nope. My audience is people at home. Hi everyone, my name is Rose Noma Abba. I'm an artist and researcher living in Enugu, Nigeria, and I run Studio Styles. Studio Styles is my workshop, my art and research practice. It's where I cultivate social healing. And for me, social healing is a continual process of deepening our connection with ourselves, our communities, our histories, and the environment. So I wanted to start talking about stuff I'm reading, and starting with this book, The Next Day by Melinda Gates. It is about transitions, changes, and moving forward. The next day is literally the day after a change happens. How do you move on? So backstory: I'm going through changes like Eminem, and I've been going through changes. I think your entire 20s is just, well, I think all of life, and that's been the argument to this book. Really, change is the constant. As I said in my film, You Matter to Me, change is God. It's what's going to abide by us from the beginning to the very end. And I have to remember that, especially in times like now when the temperature in Enugu is 37 degrees, super hot. There's also, Nigeria is currently experiencing an electricity problem because of dry season, but also because of our very poor capacity to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity around the country. Anyway, so things are really tough, and it's just worth remembering that things will change. Sometimes they'll change from the worst, from bad to worse, worse to better, better to good, good to better, good to bad. Anyway, but the main thing is like, how do you navigate change, and how do you relate with change in such a way that it becomes an opportunity for growth in your life, an opportunity to learn more about yourself and to learn more about life, because all of this is a gift. Okay. So my plan with this book is just to share some of the quotes that I underlined, or some of the passages that really hit home, and some of them I'll share why it hits home. Okay, so I want to start with the passage that actually made me buy the book. There's a parable from the spiritual teacher Ram Dass that I often think about in times of transition, one that certainly would have been helpful to me that semester. The story begins with two waves traveling together through the ocean, one big and the other small. As they get closer to land, the big one sees what's about to happen. One after another, the waves ahead of them are crashing into the shore, their force dissipating, their height collapsing, their imposing shape dissolving into foam. Devastated, the big wave tells the small one what's about to happen, warning in a grave voice that the end is near. The small wave receives this warning with incredible equanimity. Don't worry, it says, we'll be fine. You don't understand, the tall wave insists. This is it, we're done for. The small wave is unmoved. No, it says, we're not. And I can explain why in just 6 words. You're not a wave, you're water. You're not a wave, you're water. You're not a wave, you're water. The next passage in 2011, so here she's talking about losing one of her best friends, John, to cancer. In 2011, I took a trip to a meditation center in the Hudson River Valley. On my first day there, I was walking along an outdoor path to my room. birds chirping overhead, when a woman hurried up beside me with an urgent look on her face. "You said you were at Microsoft," she said. "What years were you there?" I wasn't sure where she was going with this, but I told her. I was anticipating some questions about Bill. Bill here being Bill Gates, her husband, her ex-husband. But she took the conversation in a totally different direction. "I'm wondering," she asked me, "if you ever knew a man named John Nielsen." Even just hearing his name made me startle. Yes, I told her I knew John. More than that, I said I loved John. He was one of the best friends I ever had. "Oh my God," the woman gasped. "I worked under him in the sales office in New York. He was one of the most meaningful people I've ever met in my whole life." "Me too," I told her. "Me too." And suddenly, for a moment, more than a decade after John's spirit slipped out of the sunlit bedroom ringing with his children's voices, his hand still clasped between Emmy's, he was back. He was right there between us. As the woman and I started trading happy memories of our friend, I realized he was once again doing what he always did, bringing people comfort, making them feel special, making them smile. For so many years, I've missed John so much, but that day, for a moment, I didn't have to. That was very warm. When I was going back and forth about whether to buy it or not, I considered not buying it because it felt very simply told. As opposed to other memoir books that I've known and loved, it doesn't go into rich detail with rich language. And I love reading books for the way the authors play with language. For me, language is one of those things that I love the most about life. It's like playing with food, playing with colors. I like to see you do dazzling things, and not for show. Like, I like to see it when it feels like this is a reflection of how you see the world and how attentive you are to different things in the world, because that comes out in the way you use language. But she doesn't quite, this is all very simply told, all very compressed. Anyway, on to page 117. In her book Radical Acceptance, Dr. Tara Brach describes the Buddhist concept of the sacred pause, writing, "A pause is a suspension of activity, a time of temporary disengagement when we are no longer moving toward any goal." I'll read that again. A pause is a suspension of activity, a time of temporary disengagement when we are no longer moving toward any goal. These pauses, she says, can last for an instant, for hours, or for seasons of our life. What makes them so important, she explains, is that pausing helps us become absolutely available to the changing stream of life, instead of closing ourselves off to possibility. I feel like, as I said earlier, I'm in a season of transition, and my season of transition has come with a long pause. And a long pause that's had different phases of different kinds of pauses. Sometimes it's a pause from an identity, it's a pause from a group, a pause from certain schedules or ways of living that I had grown accustomed to, that I had fought really hard for as well. But now it's time to let them go. And sometimes it's the quite literal pause of taking a nap, learning to take a nap midday. I can't tell you that I've really gone far in that lesson, but I know I've taken one midday nap that wasn't entirely migraine induced, which is a big success for me this year. And I really liked what makes them so important, she explains, is that pausing helps us become absolutely available to the changing stream of life, instead of closing ourselves off to possibility. Available. Page 125. So this is from the commencement speech she made at Stanford, one of those years. What years? I don't know. But my advice is to leave room for those plans to change. Again, still on the positives and availability to the changing streams of life. But my advice is to leave some room for those plans to change. Resist the idea that anything you've done here at Stanford has already locked you into any one path or any one kind of life or career. Be excited about the fact that you will encounter possibilities you haven't imagined yet, and be willing to let what you learn shift your thinking about what you're on earth to do. I've learned, however, even if it took me decades to learn it, that it's worth leaving some space between the lines of those lists. So this is a list of like our ambitions, our goals. Space for spontaneity and fun and joy, space for new ideas and new people, and most of all, space for its own sake. Because when transitions come, and they will come, we need to be ready to spend a bit of time in the clearings in our lives that they create. After all, transitions are disruptive and disorienting. They lay waste to all our careful planning and force us to question our assumptions, our ambitions, even our very identities. But that I've come to understand is part of their magic. I think this point is just really, really important. As cliche as I don't know about you, but I've heard, I live in this gospel every day. The importance of taking time, of leaving space, of making clearings, of allowing God to also do as you do. You know, I grew up very much holding the Bible verse that says, is it a Bible verse or just like popular advice? Heaven helps those who help themselves. And so for me, it was like, God will never find me wanting, as in terms of helping myself, doing my part. Don't worry about it, God. I'll do your part for you, just so that it will be easier for you when you want to come to do your own part. I will, I'll make it as easy as possible as it can be for you. Don't worry, I'll think about both of us. And that's how I got through life. That's how I got through childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood. And slowly but surely, starting for me missing my university offer, like life and God started teaching me almost by cruel force, because that's how it felt, that it's not all up to me, and that if I did not create space, if I didn't leave space, it was going to take the space, because I didn't make myself. I'm not the only one in charge. I'm in charge as well of my life, but I am in co-charge. It's always useful to leave space for the person you're in co-charge with. Because also, it's always magical, I think, at the end of the day. God's plan for us. We can't know how good, how beautiful, how sweet alignment we'll feel. I think about it this way. Most of the time, we walk through life in the thicket of our everyday routine. We're in familiar surroundings, but we're so boxed in that it can be hard to see the full landscape. In moments of transition, though, we step into a clearing in our lives. The familiar surroundings disappear. In these big, wide open spaces, there's a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of possibility. And I've learned that there are two ways to encounter these spaces. You can keep your head down and focus on finding the shortest possible distance to the next familiar thing, racing past the unknown without a second glance. Or you can find the courage to pause in that in-between space and see what it has to tell you. And then let what you learn there help you decide where to go next. You can find the courage to pause in that in-between space and see what it has to tell you. To pause in that space. It's not just about acknowledging the space and rushing to close that distance to find the shortest possible distance across that space, but acknowledge the space, sit in the space, pause in it, see what it has to tell you, and then let what it has to tell you help you decide where to go next. So these are from the last few pages. She's talking about people her age, but I think this resonates with anyone who has lost something precious. Many of the friends I've walked through life with, other women my age, describe something similar: a new feeling of peace. This might be because just about no one, no matter who you are, gets anywhere near 60 unscathed. All of us have lost something precious on our journey here: a dear friend, a sister, a partner, a parent, a job we loved, a healthy working body we took for granted. None of us gets this far in life with everything intact. The fact that we've made it here, though, is proof that we've survived our losses. And with that comes a certain measure of self-assurance that we can survive another. I think back to the story I mentioned earlier of the two waves traveling through the ocean, one big, one small. One of them is convinced that the looming shore heralds the end, and the other recognizes that it's possible to experience a crash like that without losing yourself or your core. You are not a wave, you're water. You're not a wave, you're water. And she goes on to write that that's how I'm able to look back on the version of myself who walked into that meeting I was so nervous about and feel not just unembarrassed, but actually a little proud of myself for trying so hard, for recognizing that my role at the foundation was an amazing opportunity in life and wanting to rise to the occasion, and for summoning all the courage that it took to get through the situations that used to cause me such searing anxiety. The meeting in particular was one in which she was set to meet someone who she really admired and who had worked with government for a long time. And because of that, she was intimidated. I wanted to convince her that she was someone that was deserving of this opportunity. While I took things to an extreme before that particular meeting, this was more or less how I prepared for pretty much everything back then. Every interview, every speech, even meetings at the foundation with people who worked for me. Such hard relates, like Melinda, my therapist, once told me, even if you wanted to know everything in the world, you can't possibly learn it all. I wanted to do things the right way, which in my mind almost always meant doing them the hard way. In any case, when the day of the meeting arrived, the government official walked in, and not with a 3-inch thick binder like the one I'd been lugging around with me for weeks, but with a single note card. It looked like something she had written, maybe 4 bullet points on it, nothing more. And as it happened, she was brilliant, warm, funny, and in complete command of every topic we discussed. What's more, she seemed to pull this off without pressuring herself to put on some performance of infallibility. A couple of times she had to refer to her little note card, and so she did. To think all those hours I'd spent memorizing every statistic, even tangentially related to the issues we were there to discuss, and I could have just jotted them down. And it would have been fine. Why had that option never occurred to me? All these years later, I still take my work very seriously, and yes, I still prepare intensely for meetings. But these days, I'm no longer driven by the same kind of insecurity. And this passage is so important to me. These days, I'm no longer driven by the same kind of insecurity. I finally believe that it's okay if I can't instantly summon exactly the right statistic to substantiate the point I'm making, or if the limits to my knowledge reveal themselves. Now that I'm finally okay showing up as no one but myself, I no longer treat every appointment on my calendar as a referendum on whether I deserve to be there. It's a much gentler way to live. It is a much gentler way to live. It is a much gentler way to live. I'm really happy I read this book. I think there's something very, very, very validating, comforting to see another person who prepares so intensely for everything, to the point of actually feeling embarrassed at how much you prepare. how much it's almost like you take everything so seriously and so intensely, and not because you don't have any sense of perspective, but because everything matters so very much, and you know that everything can make the difference, and you know that everything is so valuable, it's so precious. People put their time and their energy, and like every encounter with another person is a privilege, and so you prepare intensely for it. But sometimes there's an insecurity also driving that, like the momentum, the intense preparation, and that insecurity is a voice that says, oh, I will not be enough. What I know can't be enough. I need to try and learn every single thing about the world before I can be worthy of relaxing into this moment. And that's something that, like, once you cross over it, it's like before and after. I'm experiencing it in my life right now. I can't say that I'm completely on the other side, but I have seen what the other side can look like, and I can see that it's possible for me, and I'm practicing being that person who shows up, even like this, to this YouTube video. And okay, I think I will end there. And I'll end there. Well, I'm not ending there. I'm ending with this passage, which is on page 152 at the end of the book, and it actually sums up the whole point of the book. What matters most is not what happens to us, but how we respond to those events, both in the moment and, really quite importantly, on the next day. Because what we do on that next day is what makes us who we are and how we make our lives our own. This is true of all kinds of transitions, happy or sad. A few years ago, my friend Killian introduced me to the work of the late Irish poet John Donoghu. I've been thinking lately of a poem of his called For a New Beginning. It opens like this. In the out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. This beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. Okay, that's that for my first YouTube video of this kind. I could have obviously prepared a lot more. I'm trying to show up to the world, not fully prepared as I am. Not feeling completely ready, not feeling completely put together. In any case, the whole point of Studio Styles is actually being at home, feeling at home, finding that sense of like being at home and not performing for a stage. Stages are important, but not here, because that's not what I want to do here. I'll do that in other parts of my life. But here, I want to meet myself in its nakedness, and to be able to love that person and to love that presentation. Sometimes that nakedness will be adorned, other times it won't, but every time she will be mine. Okay, bye.